And welcome to AgeWise Colorado's ongoing educational webinar series. This one is number 20 in our series. Excuse me. Understanding military veteran programs for vets and their families. So what I'm going to do now is I'll mention that Barbara Boyer is on our call here today. She's our executive director. And I'm going to go through a few slides, introduce our panelists, and then we'll get rolling. Today's panelists are Dr. Carrie Levy, who is the division head of geriatric medicine and director of the Multidisciplinary Center on Aging at the University of Colorado, and section chief of palliative medicine at the Rocky Mountain Regional VA Medical Center. Dr. Levy received her undergraduate degree from Pepperdine University, her medical degree and PhD from the University of Colorado. As a health services researcher, she focuses her research on improving long-term care for frail elders using innovative models of geriatric care. Our next panelist is Stephanie Hartz, licensed clinical social worker, geriatric and palliative telehealth social worker, Rocky Mountain Regional VA. Stephanie came to the VA Center in Aurora in 2010, where she was appointed to be the Eastern Colorado Telegeriatrics Dementia Social Worker, and in 2016, the Telepalliative Care Social Worker. Ms. Hartz received her bachelor's degree in social work from the University of Northern Iowa in 2006 and has years of experience in long-term care and skilled nursing home settings while earning her master's of social work degree from Denver University. Stephanie has a concentration in adults' late life challenges and is certified interpersonal trauma studies in palliative and end-of-life care. Next panelist is Sandy Morris, who is with the War Veterans Association of Colorado. She has a long history of financial services and joined the War Veterans Association 10 years ago to assist wartime veterans in applying for aid and attendance funding. This Veterans Administration benefit provides funding to veterans and their spouses or widows to help with long-term care expenses. Sandy will explain to veterans and their families what the benefit is and provides for and the requirements to qualify. Brenna Barros is the Senior Manager, Volunteers of America for El Paso County. Brenna started out working in the office, helping individuals who were released from incarceration before transitioning to the Springs office in 2021. And she oversees 3 programs throughout El Paso County. 2 of those serve the veteran population, and our third involves individuals with criminal backgrounds. All focus on housing. And our final panelist is Spencer Milo, MBA, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, retired, who is the Director of Strategic Development and External Relations for the Marcus Center for Brain Health. Spencer is a medically retired post 9/11 U.S. Army Airborne combat vet and Purple Heart recipient who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, where he was severely injured by a suicide bomber, suffering brain and other injuries, and spent years recovering. He was later contacted to start a new program focused on veterans and modeled after the National Intrepid Center of Excellence at Walter Reed Hospital. That new organization became the Marcus Center for Brain Health at UC Anschutz. Spencer is a passionate advocate and spokesman for veterans and veterans issues, and also serves transitioning military members and veterans in his civilian career today. So we have quite a panel of folks, and they're all going to talk about their own special areas of focus. So please stay tuned. A little bit about AgeWise Colorado, for those of you who don't know who we are. We are working very hard to become the premier information and vetted resource hub for aging Coloradans and their families. So we're all focused. We're focused totally on Colorado, and typically that starts at about age 40. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So there are roughly 3 million, 2.7 right now, but growing numbers of Coloradans over the age of 40. So that would include caregivers, care receivers, and people who are living independently. But either way, we're here for you. We know that when older family members may find themselves in need of some help, often the first call they make is to an adult child. And those are the folks here in the middle of this sandwich, hence the name Sandwich Generation. So we serve aging Coloradans and their adult children, employers. We help support the caregiving population inside the employee ranks, and our vetted service providers, of course, and organizations who are just committed to healthy aging Coloradans. These are all the categories of services that you'll find on our website. So please do check these out. We have had, as I said earlier, this is our 20th webinar. So we've covered most of these topics in a webinar in one way or another. And we'll be continuing to have these webinars next year. For the rest of this year, as you can see here, we had a couple back in October. Those recordings are on our website today. The veterans programs, which you're going to be watching now. And then we have this coming on November 17th, fraud and scams. So we'll be having panelists from various district attorney offices, judicial districts, who are working with fraud and scam issues every day. And then finally in December, we'll talk about geriatric trained healthcare providers and why that's so important, especially here in Colorado. So at this point in time, I would like to, I'll stop sharing here for just a second and introduce to you Dr. Carrie Levy. And take it away, Carrie. Thank you.
I am pleased to present to you today about our hospice and palliative care program. Very happy to answer questions. I'll go through just a few specifics and could talk about this all day. So somebody will need to cut me off and make sure I stay in my allotted time. But the VA has a continuum of care, and really some of the most outstanding programs in the country, if not the world, related to the care of older veterans. And so we really try to identify needs at various stages of aging and then plug in the appropriate services for that particular veteran. And Stephanie's going to talk about a number of things as well related to care of older veterans, but I'm going to begin with outpatient palliative care. So, oh, great. Thank you so much. So we have a team that works in outpatient palliative care, and palliative care meaning to comfort or to cloak. And palliative care, importantly, is not hospice care. It is appropriate for any veteran at any stage of their life or their illness, when that illness is serious and impacting the quality of their life. So we see veterans who are at end of life, but many of the veterans we see are at various stages in their illness. And so we have a number of physicians, nurse practitioners, social workers, psychologists, chaplains. We even have a dog on our team who is a specially trained dog to be in the hospital, and the dog rounds with us every day. So we have a fairly interdisciplinary team. We also actually have a pharmacist who helps consult during our clinic visits. And the idea of all of this is figuring out what matters to this individual at this stage of their life, given their current health challenges. And so what we typically do is spend the initial visits or moments of visits trying to figure out what it is that matters to this individual veteran and establishing goals of care, their goals of care. And that can take some time, but the idea is that we're then able to frame the care around what matters most to this person. So this might be they really want to be able to get out and fish with their grandchild. And that's a very motivating thing, but right now their illness is preventing that. And so we can really frame a care plan around how do we get you out to the river or out to the stream or out to the pond to fish with your grandson. We work a lot on symptom management to allow that to occur. helping with pain management, nausea, constipation, diarrhea, all those symptoms that can be really troubling and make it difficult to do the things that people wish to do. We talk about benefits. So the VA has a lot of benefits, and we try to connect veterans who are going through serious illness with the appropriate benefits for that time of their illness, but then also the benefits that are available to them if they do indeed die and need post-death bereavement type resources. We spend a lot of time talking about advanced directives and documenting preferences for care in the event of serious illness. Of course, our first go-to is to talk directly with the veteran, but if they reach a stage where they're unable to communicate their preferences, either because of confusion related to illness or are they on artificial life support, ventilators, that kind of thing, and aren't able to render a choice, we are able to go to someone they trust or go to a document that they have completed in advance and understand what their preferences for care are. So, and the VA, we have something called the Life Sustaining Treatment Initiative, and this was really standardization across all of the VAs to make sure that we're all entering basically the exact same note documentation, regardless of what VA you go to in this country, and that generates orders in the medical chart that correspond to the type of care you wish to receive. This has been a very successful initiative, and some would argue one of the most successful implementation efforts of any national healthcare initiative that we've seen recently. We try to help people navigate through the system. It's complex, it's hard to figure out all the moving parts sometimes, and one of our roles is to make sure that information is being communicated clearly and that people know how to navigate the system as best they can, and try to help across those care transitions from hospital to home or hospital to nursing home, hospital to perhaps an inpatient hospice facility. Next slide, please. The next one is about the VA hospice benefit. So as I mentioned, palliative care is really available along the entire continuum of care for veterans. Hospice is really isolated to this very, very short period of time when we believe that a veteran has 6 months or less to live if the illness takes the expected course. Of course, we have no crystal ball. We're not able to accurately predict that, but we do our best, and we have some tools to help us in that prognostication. And when we have an expectation, we wouldn't be surprised if this veteran were no longer alive at 6 months, then hospice becomes available. It really mirrors in the VA the hospice benefit that's available in Medicare. So the same eligibility criteria are used to identify individuals who are eligible. And the hospice itself is provided by community hospice agencies. The VA does not have its own hospice agency. So we have what's called hospice veteran partnerships, where we work with agencies in the community. Many of those, and we encourage all of them to have a We Honor Veterans partnership, where they have explicitly committed to caring well for veterans at end of life. And there's some very specific levels of commitment that hospices can work through that really demonstrate their commitment to honoring veterans who are cared for by their agency. The hospice that is provided in a community nursing home, if a veteran is eligible for hospice and they need nursing home care, that nursing home care is provided at VA expense, as is the hospice, if they receive that care in a contracted community nursing home in the VA, which is an unbelievably unique offering benefit of veteran care, of VA benefits, and something that is a wonderful thing to be able to offer someone who is very nervous. Let's say a family member is very nervous. They're not going to be able to care well for their loved one at home who has serious illness and is eligible for hospice. And they really do need nursing home care. That can often be an expense that people aren't able to absorb. You may know that Medicare pays for a very short period of rehab in a nursing home. They do not pay for long-term nursing home care, and they do not pay for nursing home care when an individual is receiving hospice. That is very special in the VA, that we're able to provide hospice and nursing home care through VA benefits. So please be aware of that as you're communicating with veterans, and if you were a veteran, please be aware of that. We also have a number of what are called community living centers. These are nursing homes that the VA operates and owns. In Colorado, we don't have one in Denver anymore. We used to, but when we moved to the new site, we unfortunately lost that community living center. But all of these centers do have the ability to offer hospice care. And then an important designation within hospice is general inpatient status. So this is when an individual is eligible for hospice. They have symptoms that are not being well managed in the care setting where they are being cared for. That might be at home. That actually might be in a hospital. I do a lot of palliative care in the hospital. And we're not good at managing end of life in the hospital generally, because we have very specific algorithms that we tend to resort to when people have a decline in their health, and those are generally not focused on comfort. And so inpatient hospices do a much better job with comfort care. And so if we have someone, for example, who's having a pain crisis, we will often transition them into a general inpatient hospice status, either in a freestanding hospice facility. You may be familiar with, for example, the Denver Hospice or Lutheran. They have freestanding inpatient hospices, or this can be done in a nursing home. And that every single hospice agency who is certified by Medicare has to have the ability to provide this level of care called general inpatient care to manage very severe symptoms. And they would either do that in a nursing home or in a hospital setting, or excuse me, in a freestanding hospice setting. Some hospices do have inpatient hospital beds, but with the crisis of lack of availability of hospice beds, hospital beds, a lot of hospices I don't think are doing that at this stage. But please know that there is this very special status where inpatient care can be provided. It's typically very short term, a couple of days until those symptoms get managed, and then they can be transitioned back home, back to the nursing home, back to the care setting that they were in prior to that general inpatient need. Next slide is about home hospice. So 95+% of all hospice is provided at home, and that's where most folks want to be, either in a residential care home or in a long-term care facility as their home. And this is provided, as far as VA is concerned, by a community hospice, as I mentioned. It's the exact same criteria that Medicare uses, and this is based on a life expectancy of 6 months or less if the disease takes its expected course. It can be through the VA, it can be Medicare or VA, and so veterans have that choice. If they are Medicare eligible, they can certainly choose for their Medicare to pay for hospice, and then VA could also serve as a payer. And so what we typically do is when we're getting someone set up for hospice, we'll ask them, who do you prefer to be the payer source? And sometimes people have a preference, often they don't, but they certainly could choose either. As far as inpatient hospice goes, there's no service connected requirement. So in nursing home care, we require that veterans have a 70% or greater service connection to be eligible for community nursing home care in one of our contracted facilities. But the same is not true if someone is receiving hospice in one of our contracted community nursing homes. And we have in the Denver metro area, about 20 or so that are contracted with VA. There's a number of them in the Springs area, and then we have an expanding what's called community care network of more nursing homes that are joining all the time. Again, meeting Medicare criteria is the criteria that we use, and in this case, if a veteran is in a nursing home and they are on hospice and they wish for the VA to cover that, the VA pays their room and board, and this can run $200 or $300 a day. So this is a significant burden off of families to be able to have their loved one cared for in a contracted community nursing home under their VA benefits. VA or Medicare can pay for those hospice services while they're in the nursing home. And importantly, we've had a number of veterans who did very well and didn't take the expected course that we often see. And in this case, we may have to discharge them from hospice. And in this case, we try to do this well in advance. I have a discussion well in advance of having to discharge that veteran from hospice such that the family can make arrangements for how that then room and board payment would be covered. Typically, what will happen is we start, if they are eligible for Medicaid, we will help them apply for Medicaid months in advance of this expected discharge. But it's important to know that if someone is what we sometimes say is graduating off of hospice, that then that room and board payment would be necessary. It would be necessary for the family to cover the room and board payment for nursing home. And so this is really not for custodial nursing home care. And I think that is what I had. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, one more. This is also a really important and very unique thing about VA is that we have something we call concurrent care. And what this allows for is if a veteran, for example, is receiving radiation therapy, let's say they have cancer and that cancer has gone to a bone, and it would really be beneficial to have radiation to that bone for pain relief and control of the disease. Or they have chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy is not intended to necessarily cure the cancer, but it is helping with some of their symptoms. Ideally, they would continue that treatment. What happens right now in Medicare most of the time is they have to make a decision. They could either have hospice or they can have those therapies. And the reason for this is that hospice is covered as a per diem. The hospice gets X number of dollars, let's just say $150 a day. The hospice gets that from Medicare or from the VA to provide all care. That's nursing, that's CNA, that's medicine, that's equipment, that's everything. And so they have to be very mindful if they're going to have a sustainable business model and take care of individuals. And so chemotherapy, of course, can run tens of thousands of dollars. Radiation can run tens of thousands of dollars. And so it's just not compatible to do that in a traditional Medicare model. But the VA is able to do this concurrent hospice service along with these therapies if those therapies are improving symptoms and focused on helping improve the quality of life of the veteran. Hemodialysis is a very specific case. If people want to talk about that, we can talk about that. But the overarching goal is let's allow veterans to have the therapies that are allowing them to live as comfortably as they can in the face of terminal illness, and allow them to have hospice care to focus on high quality end of life care.
And I will jump in. My name is Stephanie Hartz. I am a licensed clinical social worker here at the Rocky Mountain Regional VA Medical Center. I have been employed in our geriatric telehealth program since 2010, and now am working in both geriatrics and palliative care, emphasizing rural and highly rural veterans here in Eastern Colorado. And today I would like to talk about VA benefits and resources for older adults. Barbara, if you could go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So just briefly to start with, I'd like to share that the VA has three different branches, or arms, if you will. First, where I work is the Veterans Health Administration, where we provide healthcare to veterans. Secondly, we have the VBA, which is the Benefits Administration, and that's where veterans apply for disabilities that they may have incurred during their time in the military, whether that's physical or mental, and other benefits you might think of home loans, aid and attendance benefit. And the third arm is the cemeteries division. So here at the Veterans Health Administration, When we talk about VA benefits, we're talking about home care or other services for veterans that are enrolled in VA healthcare. Some of the things I'll talk about today are home health services, programs for veterans that need hands-on care, and then what VA telehealth looks like. Next slide, please. So the VA can offer home health services, which we provide through community agencies, and that can be a CNA for hands-on care related to activities of daily living, such as dressing, bathing, grooming, dealing with bowel and bladder. And I think I've covered most of them. And so veterans need to have that level of care in order to have a CNA come in and help them. But if they qualify for a CNA, then they also could get a homemaker to come in and do some light housekeeping in the area where the veteran resides. And respite care is also a benefit that the VA provides by a CNA. And I'll talk a little bit about more later. The VA can also order services that you think of that Medicare has after discharge from a skilled nursing facility or a hospital, such as an RN at home, physical, occupational, or speech therapy. Also, we have skilled palliative care, which the VA can provide palliative care ourselves, or if it's easier for the veteran to have someone in home closer to the veteran, the VA does contract with some agencies to send in those services. And just to note that these are not unique to the VA. The payer source can be VA, Medicare, or Medicaid. Next slide, please. You guys have really good questions. I'm reading the chat. And so how do you determine what a veteran is eligible for with the VA, and knowing that we have a host of resources? It's often based on their level of functioning, or what do they need care for related to their personal needs, or some of those higher functions when we think of paying bills, cooking meals, driving, answering the telephone, and managing their medications. So when it comes to VA resources and veterans that need a lot of hands-on care or support, the VA has these different programs, and in the next slides, I will talk about them. Next, please. Yes. So home-based primary care. If veterans have trouble getting to the VA for their health care, whether they be homebound or have other limitations, maybe dementia, it's hard to get out of the house and get to the doctor, the VA has a team of different providers that include a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, an occupational therapist, dietitian, pharmacist, I say social worker, and psychologists that go to the veteran's home to provide their primary care in lieu of veterans that can get to the clinic and meet with those different specialty providers. HBPC takes over primary care, and they coordinate everything through the VA that provides case management too, and palliative care can be a component of HBPC. In the Denver metro area, there's a 30-mile radius from 1055 Claremont Street, which is the old VA, that veterans are eligible, and it's in their radius to have that care at home. Next slide, please. The medical foster home is provided in conjunction with home-based primary care, where a veteran moves into the caregiver's homes. Often these caregivers are CNAs or have other experience caring for people prior to being a MFH caregiver. The veteran pays the VA, the veteran pays the caregiver directly. The VA does not have a benefit to pay for medical foster home, but there is the aid and attendance, which can help offset the services. And then I put a link there for those interested in more about medical foster home. Next slide. Dr. Levy briefly talked about nursing homes. Veterans can get the VA to pay for a community nursing home if they are 70% service connected or higher, 60% service connected and rated unemployable, or they have a service connected condition. For example, their knee is service connected, something happened during their time in the military, and they need nursing home placement based on that knee as their service connected condition. And Dr. Levy touched base for end of life. There is no service connected requirement. Every veteran is eligible for end of life care in a community nursing home if they meet that criteria. And then respite care is two different forms. One the VA offers in a nursing home in the community for a period of time so the caregivers can take a break, and there's no service connected requirements for respite, just needing that level of care. And with other VA nursing homes, there's community living centers. Ours is currently in Pueblo, Colorado, and there's state veterans homes, which veterans are able to go to, and they could have the VA pay for them if they're 70% service connected or higher. But with state being in the name, they are operated through the state, and VA is federal. So we both serve veterans, but we have different funding sources. Veteran-directed care. Good question. Veteran-directed care is where a veteran is able to employ a family member or a friend or a neighbor to provide those hands-on care needs for their activities of daily living instead of going through a home health agency. The veteran has a case mix ran through the VA that determines what level of care they need, and that is equated to a budget. And then the veteran oversees that budget, and their caregiver is paid, just like if they went to Walmart and got a job and had taxes and Social Security taken out. The veteran-directed care is the VA coordinates with local area agency on aging to do the home visits and provide oversight. But we do have a VA social worker here that approves those that are interested in enrolling. And then some folks may be familiar with the program of all-inclusive care for the elderly. It's a Medicaid program with wraparound services for participants. A lot of people have Medicaid as a payer source for the PACE program, but the VA has, if a veteran is eligible for nursing home level of care based on a service connection, then instead of Medicaid paying, the VA would pay for this program for the veterans in the Denver metro area and Pueblo, because it's an alternative to nursing home placement, and that is our goal for those that are able to do that. And so there's different PACE programs available and a link on this slide. Next page, please. So everything that I talked about here today, if you have more questions or want information, the VA Geriatrics and Extended Care website has a listing of home and community-based services. If you'd like to learn more about something that I talked about, this is a great resource to investigate further. Next slide. When it comes to caregiver support at the VA, we know our veterans are only as well cared for as their caregiver has that ability to maintain the physical and mental criteria to continue to do that. So the VA has what's called a respite benefit, and it's in two different forms. Every veteran gets 30 days per calendar year, and they can use respite in home, where the VA coordinates with an agency to do a 6-hour visit with the veteran by a CNA. So the caregiver or loved one can go to do anything they'd like under the sun, whether it's get their hair cut, go to the grocery store, go to the doctor's office, and know that the veteran is safe at home with supervision. The flip side to in-home respite is nursing home respite. And often we talk about if a family member needs to travel to the East Coast to attend a wedding for a family, but they're unable to bring the veteran, or it would be too challenging for them to leave home. the VA, through a social worker, works with the caregiver to coordinate a nursing home stay for the veteran to have 24/7 care while their caregiver is gone. Next page. And a lot of people may have heard about the VA's caregiver support program. October 1st, it was open to veterans from any era. And so there is the paid program, which is a program of comprehensive assistance for family caregivers. That does require the veteran to be 70% service connected or higher, and then need hands-on care or supervision required often. And then the general program of caregiver support services is does not have a financial benefit attached to it, but it does have education, caregiver support, and resource connection to social workers and other staff members at the VA when it comes to helpful information on caregiving, what's available in the VA, and then what are some community programs as well. And so when we think about everything we talked about, or I've talked about so far today, the VA does have telehealth services where veterans, should they have a smartphone, a tablet, or a computer, they could connect to their VA provider to have a visit at their home in lieu of fighting Colorado traffic and trying to get from their home to the VA. Some visits can be done via telehealth, and not everything can obviously be done via telehealth when it comes to hands-on exams, but some appointments or check-ins are able to go through our VA system to connect to a provider. Next, please. And on that note, the VA has what's called the digital divide, which is a consult where if a veteran does not have internet access or a video capable device at home to connect to the VA will lend them a tablet, their iPads, and they have built-in internet connection. So for those that do not have the means for technology related to finances or other reasons, the VA can loan out tablets so that veterans can connect to their healthcare provider from the comfort of their home. Next one, home telehealth is a great service that the VA providers offer when it comes to daily monitoring and check-ins for veterans about, there's a list of different disease management programs. Sometimes veterans need ongoing support and education for chronic medical conditions or mental health issues, and this is a way for the VA to help monitor veterans at home. Next slide. Annie is also a great piece of VA technology. Because of my work in geriatrics, I highlighted the Annie dementia protocol or app, and this is for caregivers of veterans, and they get a text message on their phone about 7 times or 1 day a week for a year that give educational tips, motivational information, how to deal with behaviors. Of note, Annie is available directly to veterans if they have questions about PTSD and need that form of check-in, depression, other medical conditions. Annie is available for veterans or their caregivers. Next slide. So briefly, some VA benefits when I talked about the different branches. In order for veterans to access the services that we talked about today, they do need to be enrolled in VA healthcare or VHA. In order to do that, they need to have a copy of their DD-214, which is their military discharge paperwork, which every veteran should have when they are discharged from the military. From there, depending if a veteran has a service-connected disability, which is they have, veteran leaves the military, they then need to file a claim through the benefits office saying, during my time in the military, I lost a limb, I suffered PTSD or some of the big ones, that they then apply for that to be rated as a disability through the VA, anywhere from 0% to 100% in 10 10 increments of 10 only. So nobody is over 100% service connected. And those veterans that have never registered, we don't know if they do have disabilities or not, because at some point the former military member needs to register with the VA or the benefits office and make a claim to have something they encountered during the military service connected or evaluated. And there's categories based on veterans' income if they're not service connected. And so the VA has several different ways to determine if veteran gets all of their health care free, if there are some co-pays for things. And when we think about the other branch of the VA, when it comes to burial, there is a website here that I attached for learning about all the burial benefits that veterans are eligible for. Sometimes that is determined on, did they die while they were in the military? Did they die from a service-connected related condition or not? And so each veteran and their story determines what they are eligible for. I did put a link for the pre-needs eligibility application. Veterans or their family members can go online today while they're living without any conditions, or some of them, and see what they're eligible for when it comes to VA burial. Next slide, please. So that's the end of what I have. And there's a lot of good questions in the chat, so I will save some of those for later because I might know the answers to them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Levy, and thank you, Stephanie. And I think our next speaker is Sandy Morris, and Sandy's going to talk about aid in attendance and other things that she knows about, and then we'll continue on from there. So go ahead, Sandy.
Good morning, and thank you, Bob, for this opportunity to just let people know about the benefit aid and attendance funding. The VA doesn't necessarily promote it or make it easy to get, but anybody who served during a period of wartime, that's the first qualifier, has a diagnosis, they need care and meet the financial benchmarks, can qualify for a monthly tax-free benefit that's paid directly to them, similar to Social Security, electronic funds transfer each month. Benefit amounts vary according to status. We have one for surviving spouses of a veteran. Otherwise, all of the applications go through the actual veteran. There is a benefit for a spouse who needs care, but it's always through the veteran as long as they're alive. It is a need-based benefit, so the financial qualifiers, their cost of care needs to exceed their gross total income. If it's a married couple, they look at combined income. And then there is a asset top of $138,000, and that cap does not include a house or a car. As long as they retain the house and car, they're not added into the assets. But that does cover every other asset, annuities, 401ks, IRAs, checking accounts, saving accounts, other investment vehicles. So they need to look at their total assets, and if they're below that $138,000 for this year, I think that's likely to go up next year with the cost of living adjustment, then they should look at this benefit because it does pay. It's not enough to cover all their care, but it is intended to assist. So the surviving spouse can get $13.18 a month every month, and they spend it however they want for their care. That being a cash benefit, people say, well, will a provider take aid in attendance? Well, they'll take cash, so yes. But next up would be a single veteran, and they can get $2,050 a month. A married veteran can get $24.31 a month, and that will go up again with the 8.7% cost of living adjustment next year. There is something that's I recently learned about the aid in attendance benefit. If you qualify and are awarded the benefit, you will automatically qualify for medical benefits through the VA. Just kind of a nice add-on to that. We help people with a number of different issues, but there is a 3-year look back on gifting, so you can't give money away. If you can afford to give money away, you should be able to pay for your care, is the general thought. But this is something that's a really valuable resource, and you can be able to be private pay for a while. Sometimes people have limited resources, but it can help them get through a private pay period of 2 to 3 years, and then potentially go to Medicaid as their next payer source. I'm not sure there's a whole lot more to say about aid and attendance, except it's a great benefit that people can really utilize to help cover care costs. And not sure there's anything else that would be necessary to say, except they do need their discharge papers, the ever mighty DD 214. And I did post in the chat the form you can download to get a copy of those papers. I'm sorry, Bob, this is kind of short compared to everybody else, but that pretty much is the aid and attendance funding.
So Sandy, I heard a rumor, maybe it's just a rumor, that the reimbursement rate for in-home care providers is increasing to actually open up more in-home care providers to be able to provide care.
You know, that's through the hospital, doctor, medicine test side of the VA. And
Okay.
I would note aid and attendance funding is from the money side of the VA. It's pension and compensation. It is actually a layered benefit. A portion of it's considered enhanced pension, and then part of it's compensation. And that in Colorado is an interesting point, because by the code 800 Medicaid provisions, Medicaid will not take the part that's compensation. You can keep that on long-term care Medicaid, but I would say the trick to that is you cannot let that accumulate over the $2,000 asset cap to stay qualified for long-term care Medicaid. But you can spend that money on all kinds of things that the patient might need. And in the case of a married veteran, that additional money can be used to help the community spouse meet their expenses in the home. So that's kind of a nice piece to that most of the long-term care Medicaid technicians are not aware of, but it is in the Colorado code.
So thank you, Sandy. Our next speaker is Brenna Barros. And Brenna's going to talk to us about what the VOA does for the VA. And go ahead, Brenna.
I am Brenna. I am the regional manager in El Paso County. So I focus strictly just this area. But Volunteers of America, we have a program called Supportive Services for Veteran Families, otherwise known as SSVF. That helps with housing. So we have 2 sets of veterans that we can assist. The first one being homeless prevention, which is veterans who might be housed but could be losing that housing within 30 days. Someone may be facing eviction, maybe living with a family member who have asked them to leave. They're not able to afford the moving costs that come with finding a new place to live, security deposit, first and last month's rent, things like that. And then the second round, which is rapid rehousing, which is for veterans who are literally homeless, maybe staying on the street, living in their car, a shelter, at a place that is not habitable or considered permanent, such as a hotel paid for by themselves that they can no longer afford. Our veterans can come to us via walk-in or through our community line for El Paso County. There is a screening process that we do before we do an intake to ensure that the veterans that we assist are eligible for our program. And that screening process are 3 things. The first one is, are they homeless prevention or are they rapid rehousing? Do they fit 1 or 2, either or of those categories? Their discharge status being either honorable or under honorable conditions, which is verified preferably by their DD 214. We do have other ways to verify their eligibility status, which we can ask for at the time of screening. Their income. Each county has their own area median income, otherwise known as AMI, that is dictated by HUD. And if a veteran makes 50% or lower of that AMI, we are able to go ahead and assist. And then, like I said, that last one, are they HP or RR, homeless prevention or rapid rehousing? What we do is we provide wraparound services while using community resources for services to either continue or focus on things that we're not able to assist with, such as employment, maybe mental health services, physical health services, things like that. Our focus is housing and stabilizing housing. We evaluate services every 90 days and either extend those services or coordinate with community partners for further assistance. SSVF programs with Volunteers of America are located throughout Colorado. My staff serves El Paso County, but we do have a program in SoCo that helps Pueblo and Southern Colorado regions. They help 17 counties down there. We have services in Durango and Grand Junction, Denver and surrounding Denver areas. And then we do have what's called NOCO, which specializes in Weld County and Larimer County. If we're not able to assist based on one of those criterias, we do provide community partners who might be able to. And if they do come into our program, apart from reassessing every 90 days, there are limitations for assistance. Such as based on how much a veteran makes annually. So if assistance is 50% or under, we can assist up to 6 to 9 months. Currently, that assistance limit is on pause, so we are able to assist longer than that 9-month period, but that could resume at any time. Our grant is funded through the VA, so if the VA tells us that it's time to put those restrictions back on, we do go back and put those restrictions back on. However, we do have also an additional program called the Shallow Subsidy Program, which means if a veteran is with us and they are running up to that time, maybe that 9 months, or they've been with us for a little bit and they are able to pay at least 50% of their rent, we are able to refer them over to the Shallow Subsidy Program that is within our VOA program. And they help pay 50% of that rent, the remaining 50, for another 2 years. And to be eligible for that, the veteran has to be able to show that they can increase their income during that time. So if they get referred, they maybe are struggling to find employment, maybe they are finding employment, but it's just not enough, so they're trying to find supplements. If they're in that program, they have 2 years to continue to fight for that additional income. And once that is reached, either that 2-year mark or sometime in between, whichever is first, when they can take over their rent fully, 100%, they will be exited from the program.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Pretty quick.
Your focus is on housing, and I've been hearing a lot of acronyms today, so I always do. So hopefully everybody that's listening here has at least some basic understanding of what those are. I'm going to introduce our last panelist, and then we'll dive into. We have a lot of questions in the chat, so after that we'll dive into those. So stay with us. Spencer Milo is our next presenter, and Spencer has quite an interesting story of how he got to where he is doing what he's doing today, and I'm sure he'll share that with us. He is a combat vet and had some pretty extensive injuries, and has been on a long road to recovery from that, and along the way got introduced to a program that he's going to be talking about at the Marcus Center for Brain Health. So go ahead, Spencer. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. It's good to see everybody here. Always happy to hear other good people sharing what's out there for vets and their families. So I appreciate what everyone on this call is doing. As Bob mentioned, I am a combat veteran myself. I was injured in both Iraq and in Afghanistan, and have spent plenty of time getting treated at Walter Reed, and at various different segments. I've gotten some help at the Rocky Mountain Regional VA as well, and all of my experiences have been very positive there. So I appreciate what everyone does. What I do here at the Marcus Institute for Brain Health, which is on the University of Colorado Anschutz campus, is provide a cost-free traumatic brain injury and psychological health treatment program. So we're modeled after a program that I was treated at Walter Reed, called the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. It's an interdisciplinary model focused on traumatic brain injury and the co-occurring comorbid psychological health issues that come. We were very lucky that about 6 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Jim Kelly, who founded the NICO and saved my life, myself and a few others decided that it was time to create something like this for veterans. We went and worked with a very generous individual named Bernie Marcus, one of the co-founders of Home Depot, and he's been able to fund our program for the past 5 years and will continue to go. And we now have a network of 7+ centers and hopefully end up being 10. So what we focus on in the interdisciplinary model is really communicating with our patient and whatever that is, and kind of like some of these other programs, really what's important to that patient, not just what the book says is a traumatic brain injury symptom or a mental health symptom, but what is affecting the daily life of our veterans and their family members. We do work with first responders as well, which is something we started doing about 2 years ago. And again, this is all at no cost. So all you need to be able to do is prove that you are a veteran. We do work with other than honorable discharge status as well. And it does not matter at what time you served. It doesn't, I mean, you could be a Korean War veteran, Vietnam era veteran, Gulf War, current, post 9/11, whatever it may be. And your injury does not have to be service connected. You just have to be able to prove to us that you were a veteran and that you did have a brain injury. And that brain injury, really the way that we can work with that is, even if you don't have it documented or diagnosed, if you can explain it to us, our intake team and our professional team will be able to kind of dig through that and help do that. So we start off with a 3-day eval. And so we will bring you out from wherever you're at, whether or not you're in Colorado or not. We'll bring you out, we'll fly you, drive you, whatever it need be, house you and feed you. And we'll make sure that over that 3-day period of time, we kind of get an idea as to what's really going on. If we can help you and you're willing, we'll invite you back for a 3-week intensive outpatient program. We have a housing unit here on campus. We call it Colonel's Row. It's actually one of the old Colonel's duplexes on campus that we renovated. And so it's got 11 bedrooms that are 11 bedrooms, 9 bath, 3 fully ADA accessible. And we also have access to a couple hotels nearby, depending on situations that may require someone to stay in a hotel versus our housing unit. We work very closely with the VA. We actually have a part-time employee that's with the VA, which is very nice, Amelia Worthy. She's a social worker. She's fantastic. And so we really try to consider ourselves a force multiplier to the VA. Whether or not you're currently working with the VA or not, if you're not, we try and convince you to and try and teach you how to advocate for yourself. And so you can help yourself through the VA. And if you're already working with the VA, that's one of the perks of having Amelia, is that she can kind of help navigate both sides of it. So after you come to us, if there are any kind of follow-on protocols that you need to go on with, we're not just sending you to the wolves and saying best of luck. We really try to make sure that we can help. Like I said, for us, we do all sorts of different modalities. Like I said, it's interdisciplinary. So I would say that you have your traditional modalities. So neurology, behavioral neurology, mental health and behavioral health. We've got physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. We do have a clinical pharmacist on staff as well. That way, if there is any medication issues or concerns, to include if anybody is using, medical marijuana or anything along those lines, we know being in Colorado, that is a thing. And so our job is not to tell you to do it or not, but just to educate you on the effects that it may have on what you're doing and how you're trying to treat yourself. And then on top of it, we also have some, I like to call them complementary modalities. Some people would call them Eastern medicine. We have mental health programs, canine therapy, equine therapy, art therapy, mindfulness, yoga, meditation. Really, our job is to open doors to make you feel better. I personally don't care which door you walk through, as long as you walk through one of them. And it might open up your mind to the rest of the things that are out there for you, like these great programs that you just heard from. So, Bob, I'll be brief. And so if there's anything that I can do to help or any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to. I put the website in the chat. So if there's any other things you're curious about, feel free to go look into that. But otherwise, I appreciate your time and hopefully, well, I would say hopefully I won't bump into any of you, but if I do and you come through the program, we'll offer you the best care that we can.
So one quick question for you, Spencer, and you may have said it and I missed it. What's the length of the program once somebody's enrolled in it?
So there's the 3-day eval, and if you're appropriate for the rest of our program, it's a 3-week intensive outpatient program. That's not back to back. We know that people have jobs, lives, and so it can be, but we try to work with the patient as best that we can and to accommodate their life and their schedule as best we can.
Okay, thank you. So we have a lot of questions in the chat, and Stephanie, you indicated that you'd like to answer some of these, so you go right ahead.
I usually follow the social worker, but if anybody else wants to jump in, I would love to share the wealth. Some of the questions I did reply in the chat specifically with links because we're the VA. Some questions aren't so simple. I did want to, Marcia had a question about conservators. Sounds like you might be in a living, maybe a nursing home or assisted living, Marcia, when it, questions and conservators and getting the veterans' income changed.
I work for Helping Hands Consulting, and we're a fiduciary agency that helps people with Medicaid and veterans that have VA benefits. We do not want to become a fiduciary through the VA because we're going to be on a short-term basis. So what our intention is to get the income that they receive to move to the facility where they're at versus the community bank where it's going now, because the community bank is typically closed. And then the veteran would just use an account that's set up for him at the facility, him or her at the facility. So a lot of times we need to, make that happen for the veteran. That's like the most important thing for us to do, is to get their income, verify their income, first of all, and then get it moved to the proper facility so they don't lose their benefits.
And are you talking specifically about VA benefit funding or Social Security, for example?
Social Security, we're okay with. We've got that figured out. It is definitely the veterans' income for their aid and attendance and so forth, or any income that they get from the VA that's their benefit for their services. That we're we're really struggling to get that moved to their new facility.
My recommendation would be to have someone in conjunction with a veteran call the regional office which I'm putting that information right here, to request the verification of VA income.
Okay.
And then working with the veteran, I think there's a form to change what bank account or where their VA benefits come through. The VA is trying to do everything electronic. So the benefits office can also get that form to change deposit location.
They will let us change the direct deposit. However, the VA doesn't recognize conservators. So what we've been struggling with is that they want us to become a fiduciary, which is something we're not able to do, or we're able, but it's not really necessary because we're just on the case for a short time to get their income moved. So we struggle with the same thing with Social Security. They don't recognize a court-appointed conservatorship either.
I hear you, Marcia. The VA, and that's the tricky part, I think, what you hit the nail on the head, is that we recognize fiduciaries. The VA wants to ensure that the veterans' funds related to their military service are being used to the best of the veterans' needs and abilities. And so the VA does acknowledge, recognize, and use fiduciaries, but that conservatorship is a loophole, like you're noting. And that's where I say making sitting next to the veteran and calling the benefits office and saying, John Smith here. I'm working with this person and we need to talk about my benefits and getting an income verification letter and next steps to move it.
We do that. Thank you, Stephanie. We do that quite often when the veteran is capable, but if they don't have a capacity to communicate, which is sometimes the case, unfortunately, veterans come to us that don't have any family, they don't have anyone. So they end up in a skilled nursing facility and they're not able to communicate. So is there a fix for something like that? I mean, we don't mind calling with the veteran. That's something we do all the time. But if they're not of capacity to communicate, that's where the struggle is.
Mm-hmm. And do those veterans have someone listed as a power of attorney for medical or financial power of attorney? Probably not if they're using your organization.
Yeah, the ones that we struggle with don't have anybody. They are, they've been, they were living on the street and then someone took them to a facility. I mean, they're very difficult and sad cases because they can't communicate. They don't have anybody that can represent them. They come to us because of all those different determining factors.
I wish there was a loophole. Sandy, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, yeah, for the aid and attendance, they don't recognize power of attorney as they just noted. And the fiduciary process is fairly lengthy and complicated. So in the instance of that though, Marcia, if the aid and attendance, if there's no fiduciary appointed, it will start going directly to the care provider. But you won't be able to collect back payment. Typically, you get back payment from the date that the application is accepted or when your intent to file letter is dated. But without the fiduciary, they will sacrifice any back payment from that date. But it will start going directly to whoever's providing the care, be it a community or home health or whoever.
Is that once the fiduciary process is completed or if the fiduciary process doesn't get completed? I'm sorry.
If there's no fiduciary appointment, then it will go directly to the provider.
Okay, thank you so much. That's very helpful. I know we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, but we're just doing our best to help these veterans get their benefits. So thank you very much.
Thanks for the question, Marcia. Is there another question for you, Stephanie, or any of the other panelists in the chat?
I think Stephanie addressed this, but there is a question about someone that wants to get information about a Korean vet qualifying for benefits at home. If you could just maybe address that again quickly.
Mm-hmm. Any veteran that's enrolled in VA healthcare, if they have questions on what would be a good fit for them in their specific situation, I recommend to call your primary care provider at the VA and ask to talk to the social worker to go over on an individualized level or basis what's the veteran's functions when it comes to physical or mental capacity, and get a customized workup of the things that I talked about today. Is what are the veteran eligible for now, and then to consider the future. Maybe you're able to dress yourself and take care of all your personal needs today, but if there was a change, what would that look like in order to qualify for VA in-home services or other benefits?
Thank you. And we had a question from Juliana Young earlier. Does a veteran need a VA MD note for the home care benefit?
In order to get home health care services ordered from the VA, a veteran has to have a physician of record, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a provider to write those home health care orders. So if there's veterans that are thinking in the future, they'd like to connect to the VA or get home health services, the time to start is now versus waiting. And get an appointment with your doctor and talk about the things and areas you need help with so that you can get an assessment from a doctor and talk to their nurse or their social worker about what needs are tailored to that veteran.
Back to that 70% question. I mean, what is the answer to that? I mean, if 70% service connected, I don't know what that means.
Well, Bob, you've noticed the common theme of 70%. That's the quote unquote magic number when it comes to veterans receiving their healthcare services free of charge, their medication, everything free from the VA, including long-term care in a nursing home or other long-term care extended services. 70% is the number that the VA has determined that the disability is such a great percentage or number that the VA will cover their long-term care services. So 70 is the magic number. We reference that a lot. Different percentages mean different things are free or there would be a copay. And my little plug here is that if a veteran leaves the military and they apply for disability benefits, if you get a 0%, and for example, you're 30 years old and you're 0% service connected for your knee, limited flexation of the knee, maybe when you're 70, that condition has gotten worse, or maybe even at 50. Having a 0% rating keeps the door open that in the future, if you get older and your knee condition gets worse, you can be reevaluated and potentially have an increase in that disability rating from the VA with higher money, higher services. And it looks like Dr. Levy's going to throw additional information in here too.
Yes, please go ahead, Dr. Levy.
Well, I know this is such a funny term, to use. So one way to think about it is, for example, a veteran who has Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So this is an unbelievably debilitating and ultimately fatal disease. They are automatically rated at 100% service connection because this is, an incredibly debilitating disease. So I think that's a one way of thinking about it, because the rating has to do with how disabled you are by that particular illness or injury. And in the case of ALS, you are 100% disabled because this will ultimately render you unable to care for yourself and will ultimately take your life. So that's the 100%, and something that 70% would be significantly impacting your life. And then the ratings go down from there.
And who does those evaluations?
Compensation and Comp and Pen.
Comp and Pen does them, but you apply to have your disability evaluated and rated through the VA, through the benefits or the VBA. So that your doctor is set, they may review your doctor's notes, but that goes through a different branch of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
Okay.
An interesting side note to ALS, they don't know what the linkage is, but since the Civil War, they have seen there is a linkage with military service and ALS. So it is an automatic.
And we should mention, if you know a veteran, if you are a veteran with ALS, you should absolutely go to the VA. And if we, like at the university, on the university side, if we diagnose ALS and we know that that individual is a veteran, we immediately get them to the VA, because the VA does better than any system with care of ALS, because their spinal cord injury services are so good, and everybody knows that's where you're going to get the best care. So you should just go to the VA.
Well, thankfully, we have folks like you folks who understand all this, because just from an outsider's point of view, it sounds kind of complicated. But so this has been very helpful. I hope to everybody that's on the call here. My father was a vet, and I remember going through this process with the aid and attendance situation, and yeah, we had to have some outside help for that as well. So, okay. Are there any other questions? You can open your mic if you'd like and just ask the question yourself. That would be okay at this point.
I just want to say I'm really thankful to learn some of the medical benefit pieces. We get questions all the time, and that's not really what we do, but I love being able to direct people to the resources they need. So I really appreciate, if no other reason, being involved in this so I can learn more about how to help people get access to any medical benefits that they should, have earned.
Right. Thank you. Well, and our reason for doing this is because I think there are a lot of people who are not aware of a lot of the benefits that are available. And so we want to make sure people become aware. And so we have this recorded, and we will we always do a little bit of editing on these things before we post them on our website. But it's not very much editing. It's just, just clean up some of the stutters and stammers along the way. And then we get it up on the website, and you're free to use those links and send those to people that that might benefit from the information that you've heard today. So anyway, if there are no other questions, I just want to thank all of our presenters. It's just been very informative, and we really appreciate your time. And thank you to our attendees for joining us today. So with that, we'll sign off. Have a nice afternoon, everybody.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.